Welcome to No Filter Doctor, where we cut through the health hype and dig into what's real, what works, and what's backed by evidence. I'm Dr. AK. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thanks for joining me today. If it's your first time, welcome. We embrace you. I have a very exciting topic to discuss. It is how to stay healthy over the holidays. Wait, before you're like, I don't want to hear it. I promise you that I am giving you things that are actionable and realistic. A lot of people in the health and wellness space will talk about these expectations and things to do over the holidays, and I think it is completely unreasonable for most normal people to do this. So we are going to keep it real and talk about some ways that we can stay healthy over the holidays. We're going to talk about physical health and mental health because I think it's really important to address both of these facets of our overall health. And you're going to laugh at me here because my inspiration for this was National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. This movie is hilarious, even after watching it 30 times, and I love it. But the other thing about it is it's very real. So, Clark is all excited. It's a time of gathering, celebration, connection. He wants all this stuff to be perfect. But it's also a time of consumerism, financial stress, marathon meal preparation, expectations, keeping family members happy, overeating, undermoving, and with very little personal time to reset in between. I mean, some people are sharing rooms with siblings, just like in the movie. And I know no one ever really gets that deep when we're talking about holiday comedies, but it's kind of true. And so this week, I want to use my inspiration of one of my favorite holiday movies to talk about how we can deal with all of the things that we are faced with over the holidays. The physical side of our health comes down to movement and nutrition. And it's really challenging to stay physically fit when our routines are interrupted. I personally struggle with this because I hate exercising. The only things that keep me going with exercise are consistency, and I have goals. I have to set goals for myself, what I want my VO2 max to be, what I want my HRV to do. So that's why I exercise. But the holiday throws so many of us off of our routines because we're trying to see friends and family, we're traveling, we're eating these really big meals. And the issue is when we don't stay on task and either gain weight, lose muscle mass, or drop in our cardiovascular health, a very large percentage of us will not get back to our baseline once the holidays pass. That's why the best strategy is to try and stay on top of it. So how can we do that? Well, from a nutritional standpoint, it's eating very intentionally, but not sacrificing joy. I think hypervigilance, detailed calorie counting are not the answer. That is not fun. That is not joyful. And if anything, the holidays should be joyful. But it also sets us up to really overdo things. And we've all had moments where our plates look like a mountain of all these different samples of every dish on the table. So here are some intentional things that we can do to help with that. One of the best strategies is use a smaller plate. Research shows that when it's on our plate, we are going to eat it. Literally, plate size directly affects how much food we consume. So if we use a smaller plate, it's a great way to lower the overall food consumption. It also matters what you're putting on the plate. Start with vegetables and nutrient-dense foods, lean proteins. These are the things that are high in fiber, have a low glycemic index, and they provide a sense of fullness. When you put these on your plate first, there's less room for the really calorie-dense foods. The other thing you can do with that plate is limit those processed foods. Ultra-processed foods make up a huge portion of the standard American diet, and we're pretty confident that these contribute to weight gain and higher mortality rates. Now remember, I say pretty confident because we've talked about these nutritional studies in the past. There's nothing that we can 100% prove. We can only get to the point where we're pretty darn sure. And we are pretty darn sure that these ultra-processed foods lead to poor health. So go for dishes that have whole food ingredients. Again, they're going to keep you fuller, longer, and they're going to stabilize your blood glucose levels. The final thing to do with that plate is slow down. So eating slower is going to result in less overall food intake. And that's because the sense of being hungry or being full is mediated by hormones, specifically ghrelin and leptin. Well, it takes time for our bodies to sense food consumption and modify these hormone concentrations. When we are really hungry, ghrelin is high. As we eat, the body senses this biochemically from the different things that we are eating, and then it starts to release leptin. But that is not an immediate process. It takes time for our bodies to figure this out. So when we slow down how we are eating, it gives our bodies time to modify that hormone balance between the ghrelin and leptin. Right there, boom. I just gave you 4 strategies that are quite realistic and just have to do with your plate and the food that's on it. None of that was difficult. None of it was calorie counting. It was all very reasonable and very easy. It's just about being intentional with your eating. We also need to be intentional about the liquids that we consume. We tend to forego maintaining our hydration when we get together with our friends. We're drinking alcohol, we're drinking processed sugary drinks, and we're not really drinking water. And this has a handful of negative consequences for our overall health. The first consequence is our bodies confuse thirst with hunger. We don't really know what the mechanism is, but when we're not well hydrated, we will often feel hungry when really we're thirsty. That then leads to taking in extra food and packing on some more calories that we absolutely do not need. So it's important to stay hydrated so your body doesn't get tricked into thinking it's hungry instead of thirsty. The next issue is empty calories. A lot of these mocktails, cocktails, sugary processed drinks, they have 0 nutritional content and they are empty calories. I don't know if many of you realize this, but every gram of alcohol is about 7 calories. Most alcoholic beverages contain anywhere from 15 to 20 grams of alcohol. That is not counting the other calories from sugars or juices or mixers or whatever it is that you're drinking. So at minimum, just on the alcohol alone, it's 140 calories. 140 empty calories that are not linked to any nutritional benefit. These soft drinks that we drink, same thing. They are all increasing calories because of all the sugar that's in them, and they have 0 nutritional content. So you are drinking empty calories. Well, when we get together over the holidays, it's easy to rack those drinks up, which is also racking up the calories. The last thing I want to cover, which is I will share with all of you, I'll give you a vulnerable moment here. It is alcohol consumption over the holidays. I personally struggle with this, and it's not because I have a physical dependence on alcohol. It is because I am very socialized with alcohol. I have always connected good food, good company, and good drink. It's cultural, it's intertwined, and I know that's the case for a lot of us. And so separating alcohol from the good food and the good company takes a lot of effort. But the truth is, no amount of alcohol is safe. There were some studies that were like, oh yeah, if you drink a glass of red wine, then it is healthy for your heart. False. Those studies were based on Mediterranean diets where red wine is a staple of their diet, but so is lean proteins, so is a lot of fruits and vegetables, so is a lot of nuts. It's not the glass of red wine that's cardioprotective, it's a lot of the other things that are in that diet. The issue with alcohol is we know that it is linked to cancer. In fact, the World Health Organization deemed it a carcinogen. So we need to modify and be intentional about what we are drinking. And I did a whole blog post that was separate on alcohol, the safety of it, and its intake, and you can look that up. You can go on the From Dr. AK's desk. It is my blog page on the website, and just search alcohol in the search bar. That blog post will come right up, and it goes into all of the details about the studies that are out there on alcohol. And that is it. That is the nutritional things that we are going to cover. So now we're going to move on to movement, and we're going to do it in a way that is actually sustainable. A lot of us conflate exercise with sweating in the gym. They are not the same. Exercise is much more than just running on the treadmill or grinding through the weights. Exercise is planned, intentional movement. Movement. I didn't say anything in there about going to the gym Christmas morning, but we can move. There's ways that we can move over the holidays. And the reason we want to do this is we want to hold that time for exercise sacred so that we can maintain a routine. Remember, I talked about this earlier. The holidays throws us off of our routines. Being thrown off of the routines makes it harder to get back in one. So if you hold that time deemed for your physical fitness, just like you would without the holiday hustle and bustle, it is more likely that you will maintain that once the holidays are over. So how do we do that? One way is just making movement social. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I really did not feel like participating in the turkey bowl this year. However, I did because I knew I needed to. I wanted to hold that time for movement sacred, and I had a blast. Not only that, but my heart rate climbed up to about 150 for 10 minutes at least when I was running around all over the place. My neighbors do another thing where they hold a mini Olympics every Black Friday. They are laughing and having a blast. They do all these different calorie burning competitive games. You don't have to go that far. You can do a family walk. You can play tag. You can have a snowball fight depending on where you are in the country and what the weather is presenting you with. The bottom line is do something fun with the group and make it a social thing. Then it doesn't feel like exercise. You can also schedule small little workouts. You can invite other people to join, or you can do it yourself to allow for a little alone time just to kind of reset. These are things like a Pilates workout or yoga, something you look up on YouTube. It could be stretching. I have a Peloton membership, and I'm not endorsing Peloton, but the reason I'm sharing this is the app, I can just pull it up and look up a 10-minute stretching workout. Again, I'm holding that routine sacred. I can go for a 15-minute brisk walk or, a little hike through the woods, depending on where I'm celebrating the holidays. These are not big workouts, but they are, again, holding that time sacred for movement. My last tip is find ways to get your steps in. Are you going holiday shopping? Great. Enjoy it. I won't dare go near any kind of shopping facility over the holidays. But if you do, park farther away. Get the steps in to get into the stores. Rather than take an escalator, use the stairs. Go for a walk after a meal. Even a 15-minute stroll will do better with your glucose, your mood regulation, and your overall health than just sitting like a lump on the couch. All right, let's move on to the mental and emotional side of health during the holidays. Now, I will tell you that if you do nothing else but some of those nutrition and movement tips that I shared, that will protect your mental health because they help reduce stress, they help keep cortisol levels low, they're very beneficial. But there are some other things that we can do to further that. Before we get into the details, I do want to address one ugly little rumor that surfaces every year around this time of year. We always hear that depression goes up, visits to the emergency department go up, feelings of self-harm go up over the holidays. That's all lies. None of that is actually true. So I want to dispel that rumor before we get into any of the other things that we talk about. Depression actually goes down over the holidays, but we do tend to feel extra stress during the holidays. And if we haven't established coping mechanisms and we don't really know how to deal with that, it's important to come up with some tricks and different tools that we can utilize to help with that stress. And one of those is sleeping. A lot of us walk around and we're like, yeah, I'll sleep when I die. I want to hang out with everybody. That's very misguided because several studies show that when we don't sleep, we actually increase our own mortality. So it shouldn't be, I will sleep whenever I die. The truth is, if you don't sleep, you will die. I mean, it's not that direct. It's not like one late night is going to contribute to your mortality the next day. But cumulatively, not sleeping has negative health consequences. So it's really important to be mindful of the amount of sleep that you are getting. Don't be embarrassed to roll out because it's time to go to bed. And if you are embarrassed, just Irish exit. Nobody will notice, I promise. Another thing that will protect us from that mental and emotional side of our health is social connections. These are really important. I don't know if you are all familiar with the blue zones. I've mentioned it a couple times in prior podcasts, but basically they are areas of the world where people live well into their hundreds, and they're doing great. It's not like they're 100 and they are falling apart on a chair. These people are moving around, they're running, and they are very social. The thought is that these social connections have profound health benefits. What better time of the year than to maximize on the health benefits of social connections than the holidays? And my opinion, I would use social connections as gifts. Call somebody up that you haven't talked to in a long time. Spend some nice one-on-one time with the people who are important in your life. Dispense hugs if you're a hugger, and really embrace those social connections. There is going to be a lot more in terms of health benefits with that as opposed to a toy or a scarf or some other material gift. And I did also write a separate blog post on this, so you can look that up as well. I talk about all the different health benefits of social connection. All right, these next few things are different topics that I talk about with some of my patients when we sit down and they're talking to me about different things that are going on in their lives. Each one of these can be its own separate topic, but we are not going to do that. I'm just going to briefly kind of address them here. There are multiple online resources to learn more about each one of these in detail. So the first one that we're going to talk about is setting boundaries. I am not trying to be cheeky here, but it's important to know that saying no is a full sentence. We all have limits, and it's important that we protect those limits. The way that we protect those limits is by setting boundaries. In fact, setting boundaries is protective of our mental health. There were a couple studies that looked at setting boundaries in the workplace and found that setting those boundaries were protective against burnout, depression, and anxiety. There's not as much data in terms on setting boundaries in the personal aspect of our lives, but there is a lot of overlap between different stressors at work versus stressors at home. So don't be scared to set boundaries and say no. Yes, you may irritate someone, but the goal of this podcast is to help you stay physically and mentally healthy, not keep others happy and healthy. So set boundaries. And it's going to involve determining what demands are excessive and which ones are not. So you are going to have to go through and appraise some of these things. If there's a family member or someone who seems really excessive in their requests, you need to recognize that this is a them issue, not a you issue. And you can outwardly call them out on that, or you can go ahead and keep it on the inside. You don't need to address it. You just need to not let that get to you and set those boundaries. The next topic is perfectionism. You gotta let go of that. Perfectionism is extremely unhealthy. There are several studies that demonstrate a link between perfectionism and depression and anxiety. So let go of the perfectionism because you are saving your mental health. This is a mental health saving strategy, if you will. I suggest you develop the mantra that good enough is good enough. That's what I do. It is a very helpful first step. And if you are dealing with the perfectionism of others, go back to what we talked about setting boundaries, because again, that is a them issue. It is not a you issue. Do not give them power over your mental well-being. The next thing that I suggest everyone do is take a micro moment or two when you need it. And all that means is walking away when you need to walk away so that you can reset a little bit. I learned about micro moments when I had kids. You have these beautiful little creatures that you love more than anything, and you have done literally everything right. You have fed them, they are burped, they're dry, they napped. Everything about them is great, and sometimes they just cry. And they're not crying because there's something terrible going on. It's not like they're going to die. They just cry because babies cry. And my firstborn was colicky, so he cried a lot just to cry. Like, I understand he had abdominal discomfort, but what I'm saying is he was safe. My mental health was not. So what I would do is I would just lay him in his crib. I would walk away. I would take a moment to just mentally reset, take a few deep breaths, and get myself into a place where I needed to be. Then I would go back into the room and pick him up and keep holding him and helping him through that moment of colic. And some people may look upon that with judgment and say that it's being selfish. I don't care. Taking micro moments to mentally or physically reset is actually an evidence-based strategy in better performance and improved mental health. So take the moments as you need them. It is fine. You do not need to sacrifice your own well-being for everyone else. We do that a lot. We often put ourselves last. If you need the whole "I am giving you permission" statement, go ahead and take this as permission to take a little bit of time for a micro moment for yourself. My last little tidbit, or nugget if you will, is ask for help. Some of us are really awful at this, and it could be for any number of reasons. It could be perfectionism. It could be due to social and cultural constraints. I think it's really important that we address that. Maybe it's from complete lack of organization. You can't ask for help because you don't even know what you need to do next to give to someone else to help you with. Identify whatever it is that's preventing you from asking for help so that you can develop strategies that will address that, because asking for help is a great way to offload tasks and release some mental burden. It could be creating a list. Maybe it's getting everyone in your house to help with that list. Maybe it's turning your meal into a potluck rather than you cooking absolutely everything. If it's the perfectionism, rewind. You can go back and listen to what we talked about that. The whole point is asking for help and offloading to other people will release some of that burden, some of the worries. I highly advise everyone get their own personal board of directors and use this board of directors for different challenges and issues that you're going to face. It is life-saving. Even if you don't recognize how to ask for help, your personal board of directors will help you learn how to ask for help and develop different strategies to get through some of these different stressors. And that, my friends, is how we can stay healthy both physically, mentally, and emotionally this holiday season. It doesn't have to be this annual health setback. If we approach the season with different kinds of intentions and we're mindful about things, we can remain grounded, feel energized, and stay connected to people. And everything that we talked about, none of it was earth-shattering and huge. These are all like tiny, small little things that we can do here and there that will cumulatively add up to a big impact. So this season, may we all give ourselves permission to enjoy those moments that matter most and still keep our mental health and emotional health at the forefront. Happy holidays. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's No Filter Doctor. If you enjoyed the content, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also go to www.thewholehumanhealthandwellbeing.com and sign up for the weekly newsletter, where you will get a link to the blog, that week's podcast, and a health tip of the week sent directly to you. It's important to know that while I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and it's not intended as medical advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. The information discussed should not be used to diagnose, treat, or prevent any medical condition, nor should it replace individualized medical care. If you have questions or concerns about your health, please contact your own healthcare provider. Any decisions to delay or forego a medical evaluation or treatment based on the information discussed in this podcast are made so at your own risk. My only financial disclosure is my medical practice, The Whole Human Health and Wellbeing. Take care, and I'll talk to you next week.